So please introduce yourself.
Sorry, do I look at you? Yeah. Hello, I'm Sophie Perez, and I'm a painter living here in the Mornington Peninsula. I've been here about 18 years. I'm originally British, and I clearly am very inspired by the land here.
Okay, give us a bit of your background, how you came to be in Australia,
Yeah.
and your work.
Yeah. Well, when in 2002, I was studying at the Royal College in London, and I did a 6 weeks residency at the National Art School in Sydney. And I fell in love with the country, and I was determined that at some point I'm going to come back. And fast forward a few years, I happened to meet an Australian in London, and we spent 2 or 3 years racing bicycles professionally around Europe. And he bought me a return ticket, which was the most appealing thing. So we came over to here together, and the rest is history, really. We moved here in 2005 and travelled 3 years living between here and Australia and England and Belgium. And all along the way, I've always been drawing, painting, had a bit of a break from when I graduated at the Royal College, and slowly got back into my work when my children, I've got 3 children, were a little bit bigger. I really started off at the Rose Street Artist Market again. I needed to get going and made small little fabric. All my work was on fabric. I stretched fabric on handmade stretchers, and it was very much about my everyday environment. I had to paint in my bedroom, and I slowly realised that I couldn't not paint anymore. And for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been full-time painting. So.
Excellent. That's it. And you're an athlete as well, obviously.
That's a very loose term, but I do enjoy being outdoors, and I do a lot of trail running and ocean swimming now, which is my leave pass of how many weekends I can get away with this inspiration of running in the outdoors and just absorbing and really feeling involved in the environment here.
Yeah, you're actually I interviewed somebody last week.
Oh, did you?
Who's the same as you, an athlete artist.
Yeah. Such a crossover.
Yeah, I find it really interesting.
Yeah.
Does that help with your art making at all? Is that why you keep doing it, or is it just something that you keep entirely separate?
I'd say it's absolutely entwined. There's no separation for me between... I talk a lot. I do like to talk, but when I'm out running in the environment, I'm so immersed. So it's a time where my body and my mind and everything is interconnected. And I'm not a literal painter of what is in front of me. It's really about the emotions and the response to the landscape. So having this moment of being out in nature is really what does inspire me to paint and use paint as my medium to share that, I think.
So I guess that leads me into, you paint from memory, or are you painting at location?
Both. I've got to say, I don't actually enjoy painting outdoors. And it's that whole argument of like, you're not really a landscape painter if you don't, you're suffering in the environment. I'm really messy. I really am messy. My palette is a huge garden glass table in my studio with wheels on it, so I wheel it round and I can mix everything I want immediately. So I talk, I eat, I run, everything quickly. I'm quite a quick person, really. So I do a lot of sketches when I'm out there. I know where I am. So I always take a mental note and obviously often go back. I do work from photos as well. If I've taken them, I've chosen the composition, and it's my photo. I don't see why there's a problem for me to use that as my starting point. But yes, I very much do take out what I want from a landscape to paint.
I mean, working from photos versus working from memory, how does the result differ?
I think it's in everything. I don't specifically work from a photo or specifically from memory. As I say, it's the composition. It's got to have something that caught my eye, why I liked wherever I was at the time. It's usually my everyday. So my landscapes are more lush and green than they have been because I've been living on the peninsula. But before that, they were a lot more urban. It really is my everyday environment that informs me. But yeah, I do. I only pick out what I want in front of me. I'm not someone to fill everything in. It's not a literal vista of what I'm looking at. It's the bits it's very much about the light, the experience, the emotion of where I am. So yeah, it's a combination of both.
And how do you choose the landscape? Like, what is it about the scenes you choose that kind of inspire you to paint them?
I think it's got to be a landscape that surprises me. Even if it's a place that I revisit, there's something in it that captures it. I don't. Yeah, that's a good question. It's the feeling, a feeling of not giving everything away in that image. I want the landscape to for the viewer to feel like they can add their own response and approach to the place that I've captured. Most people would recognise, I believe, where it is I have painted, but it could be something really quite mundane, from the edge of a branch just to the glimmer through to something behind it. I like to feel immersed. I'm not so keen on the viewpoint of standing in front of something. I like to feel like you're in it with different, like there's a feeling of something's been there before or I've visited it before.
And I guess you're going to places that you've never been before.
Yeah.
How do you choose the places you go then?
Yeah. Well, obviously a lot of my work, as I said, is here, and I'm trail running. So even if I think I know where I am, I can guarantee to get lost and discover new places. But the most recent one was a trip to the Northern Territory, which was this time last year with a group of people that I met on Instagram that we've shown together, amazing women. So it was really a very different mindset. I felt like I began to learn and understand the place through drawing it, not knowing it before I went. So it was just going with fresh eyes. It's like being a child, just looking at things. I've never been that far up in Australia, so everything was new and quite exciting. And I almost really felt like I needed to challenge myself. That I've seen brochures since I lived in England of that part of Australia, the blue and the orange in the expanse and everything, but nothing can prepare you for being this small in that landscape and trying to have my interpretations and feeling of the place and the colour. I think is what got me in.
Yeah, how do you think that that trip now and the work you've created from it, do you think it's possibly going to change your work as a whole?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no going back from that. I think I was saying that I've never felt that immersed in a place because I didn't take any of my family and I didn't know who I was with. So you're so grounded and you just have such a different experience of being completely immersed. And I really love the idea of just having a suggestion of the mark. So these paintings from this particular exhibition, I feel like it was a very fine line between, are they undercooked? I wanted that one mark in lots of the parts just to be enough to suggest what I was looking at. And the light is so insanely different every state, I think, in Australia. But being up there, the light really changed the colours on my palette, really, for what I've never used before. So, yeah.
And so we're talking about, this is the exhibition you have on at the moment at 45 downstairs. I saw the exhibition, as you know.
Thank you, David.
I'm trying to remember how many works there was in there. It was something like 15?
Yeah, 18.
18.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you painted more than 18.
No, I didn't.
No,
I've got to say, I visited the gallery a few times. When it's got works in it, it really throws you for how big the space is. So I'm a very visual person, and obviously I had the measurements. So I think I actually did quite well that was the 18 I painted, and I felt they were cohesive enough, so I wanted them together. But yeah, it was. I knew I needed a big space for big works, and these works are not just literally big. I feel like they have a big presence because of the subject. And and I did a lot of charcoal drawings. The trip itself I didn't actually paint on. I took gouache and watercolours and materials that I clearly now know are not my favourite. So I spent the whole time doing lots of drawings, and there is 2 large drawings in there as well that made themselves in because they had a real energy in them, and I just was able to strip back any other colour and just look at the marks, the shapes, the emotions of it. So
Is that typical of you exhibiting? Like you create a body of work and you exhibit it all, or you're usually culling some?
When I say exhibited them all, I have lots and lots and lots of drawings that I could have. I do feel like the drawings could be an exhibition on their own. But I think my last solo was a smaller space in Flinders, and before that it was in 2020 in Richmond. So it's almost a relatively new experience to do it as a whole. I do a lot of group shows and smaller exhibitions, but as a space like 45 downstairs, it really needed the respect and the scale and to do it. So it was a different exhibition all round, really, yeah.
And I guess, what are you looking for when shopping for a gallery, I guess, to exhibit in? What are the key things that...
Yeah. For this particular body of work, I really wanted it to be an urban, quite a gritty, large industrial feeling of the space. I really wanted the juxtaposition of these natural works in this kind of space. And the ceilings and the light, everything about this space has really, I feel like, really gratefully elevated the works, because they look very different in your studio. I've had them all stacked up and I've been looking at them for quite a while, really. So, like we all do, you double guess yourself before you hang them, and then, and they have a very good theatre programme. They have a brilliant mailing list. The staff are young and enthusiastic, and I just feel like it was a really good choice. I've never exhibited there before, so I'm very happy with the process of the space and the accessibility. People can come in. It's open until 7:00 in the evenings in the week. So, I think I would consider again, or I'd also consider another space that has a different vibe depending on what I've painted, really.
Okay, and so you've exhibited, would you say, extensively?
Over the 20-something years I've been painting, I've had shows here in London, in Barcelona, and I've got quite a good following of collectors, which Instagram and website have been very brilliant. It's people buying in Belgium. It's it doesn't happen often, but it's brilliant. So yes, I'm definitely building it up over the last few years. I think even though for all its horrific situation, COVID, and having the time to really focus on what I'm doing was actually a good time for me sales-wise, and I made a book, and I began to really assess what it is that I want out of my own practice. So that was a good thing, as us individuals don't get JobKeeper. So, it did force me to think outside the box and pivot slightly on how I approach my painting.
I think a lot of artists quietly enjoyed COVID.
Apart from the homeschooling, I'm not a teacher. That nearly killed me. But having literally nearly I don't think we did a lot of homeschooling. But it was definitely a time to reflect on and a time for connection. I feel like I really reached out and connected to a lot of people in a different way than perhaps my work has done previously. So I was very grateful for that community.
Going back to exhibiting, so like most artists, I'm guessing you started off with group shows.
Yeah.
When did you know you were ready to actually have a solo? Like, how many group shows was there? Was there a sale? Just a moment in your head?
Yeah.
Did you think, I'm ready?
Well, that's a good question, because when I was at the Royal College in London, it's a very great college for the accessibility of shows, and immediately you go into group shows, and then I had a solo in an emerging space, but I feel like I've got two lives, and then I had a break with the children, and then it's only now, I don't know if it's my age or my work, that I don't know what I'm waiting for. If I don't put myself out there and take the opportunities that come to me, I'll take them. I mean, I love group shows. There's such a less pressure. You can blend, you can share, it's a very different feeling than having a solo show. But if you want people to come and see your work and take your practice seriously, I think I have to be very brave, really, and approach people. So.
Yeah, do you find that in terms of collectors and people buying your work, that a solo show serves you better?
I think it gives a sense of occasion. I think it definitely gave me focus to produce a body of work, because probably about 90% of my sales are direct and through my website. I also have a space in the Mornington Peninsula in Flinders, so I have a good collector's base over there, so they specifically know when I've got new works in, but it doesn't have the same urgency to have a limited window on an exhibition, which, I was very excited and looking forward to share, and it has been a very warm response to to the body of work. So yeah, it's a mixture of both. They're all good for different reasons. So
you mentioned that your website drives most of your sales. I mean, how do you even get people looking at your website? That's one thing that I've always struggled with. Like, it's one thing to build a site or get a website built, but getting people to know it's there and look at it.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point, because I just use Squarespace. Squarespace is a very manageable site for me. I'm pretty inadequate really with any kind of technology, but I can build this and I can use it, so it's obviously an easy platform. It's been a combination of things. I've done some workshops in conjunction with the Mornington Regional Gallery where I live. Brilliant people. You know, them sharing what I do, and then everything I have links back to my website. As I mentioned, a book I created in lockdown was not intentionally to be a good marketing. It was I did a call out on my Instagram to say to people, it's a pretty average time. If you want me to, I'll do a little painting, 9 by 10 inches. Send me a photo of your favourite place and a little story why it's important to you. So I obviously asked my running group, thinking no one was going to take it up. I was like, I'll do you all a painting. So I did it, and then I ended up selling them for $100 each and selling them worldwide free. But within 6 weeks, I had 250 people had contacted me. I was not expecting that response, but the real amazing thing from that was people were beginning to tell me such personal stories and were really needing this connection. So I had to cap it and said I can't do any more. And I did it every morning on my Instagram at 7:00 with the story. And then I stopped it, and I got so many emails saying, why have you stopped? What's happening? We need a next instalment. So bit of an afterthought, I did create the book and obviously asked everybody if I can use their stories. So indirectly, everyone then bought a book. And then being the lockdown longer than we expected, that was a really fortunate time for me that people then got on my website and then bought a painting because they weren't travelling. So that was a really organic way of growing my mailing list. So that was a long answer, wasn't it? But yeah, it's all been lots of different things that have just, I'm always forward thinking of, you know, you have to have a slight business mind as well as, I could just keep painting and painting and painting. But at the end of the day, you do need to be mindful. Are these going to sell? But I never paint to sell because they're usually so average. I have to paint what's really important to me, and they're the ones that usually sell, which is a lesson really, I suppose.
So you consider your work average?
I mean, if I just try and think, oh, this is a bit of a trend at the moment. You know, you look on everything, there's still lives with a painted tablecloth and the shadow, you know, so you've got your setup and you go, don't do that. Don't do, you see what other people have done. It's got to be genuine to what I want to think. No, I don't think it's average, but it can be if you're not, your heart's not in it.
Yeah, do you think looking at other people's work helps?
Oh,
or does it kind of bring you to a point where maybe you're subconsciously following trends because you see something is popular?
Oh, I mean, it never ever replaces the gallery. But you know, when you can't visit places and you can't get to, and you love some of the artist's work, it's great to be able to access it in your hand. But no, not really. I mean, I've always done me. You know, I think we all strive to. It's like your handwriting, isn't it? It's hard to not paint. But I'm also mindful that if you're scrolling through and you think, oh, I've seen that. Is that artist? And you think, well, no, but that's similar to that. And you know, there's always trends. I think there's trends of landscape being fashionable, and it was a massive clump of still lifes being fashionable. And I can't say I'm a very good portrait painter, so I don't think I'll be in that bunch. But just going to galleries and just seeing what's there and just having the conversation with other artists, even on Instagram, I've got a great community of people that I chat to about work on Instagram. It's been good. Mm.
So who are some of the artists that inspire you, and maybe genres of art that inspire you?
Yeah, I mean, you can look back at, say, 20-something years ago, and when I first started painting kind of more than 20 years ago, and, you know, A-level, before you go on to degree in England, I love the Impressionists. I used to love the Fauvists. I've always been an absolute painter. It's always been about the paint. Have you been to the Bonnard exhibition?
No.
it's like having a cuddle with an old friend. Going in that I used to love Bonnard's paint application, and to see them again in the flesh was a real taking back in time. I used to love a lot of collage artists. I used to love Rauschenberg. I always loved it's paint. I've always been paint. It doesn't matter how many mediums I've looked at. The painterly Diebenkorn. There's an endless list. And then obviously now you're looking at some of the contemporary artists, because I actually learnt Australian artists when I lived here. I hate to break it to you, it's not massively discussed in England at a British art school. So, even like when you don't know Arthur Boyd, I do now. There's a lot of artists that I've grown to love, and Fred Williams, but I've learnt them since I've lived here. It's not something that we had overly access to be honest.
Yeah. Sorry, sometimes I get a bit stuck. I don't know which way to go.
That's all right. I talk a lot.
Yeah, keep talking, please. I guess when do you think, like you said, when you were in London,
yeah,
you didn't hear about Australian artists? I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, with hindsight, it's terrible. But it's a bit like here. I feel like you don't hear a lot about outside news, culture when you're in Australia. I know how much the television is controlled, basically, of what you're actually streamed. So it's where you live, and obviously they want you to support and be involved in the country you live in. But it's an interesting gap. I mean, I've been absolutely fascinated and really thirsty for knowledge about the Aboriginal culture. And I mean, I'm very mindful when I went to the Northern Territory that I'm British, I'm English, I'm coming out to a sacred place to make work from. So I was almost nervous that I've got to make sure I have the respect and the understanding of the culture before you just rock up and make work from it. And I know I was probably overthinking it, but I did do some reading and speak to people that are much more informed about it, and it's beautiful, it's amazing, and it's nothing I've grown up with. So yeah, it's interesting. I think every country has its own bubble, to be honest.
How do you take on that responsibility? It sounds like you feel like you have a responsibility, I guess, now painting Australian landscapes as a British person. How do you deal with that, and what are some of the things you do?
I think it's an ongoing knowledge and understanding. I mean, the more you know and the more you are respectful among. I mean, I'm not a disrespectful person. It's just I understand. I mean, when I used to work at a non-for-profit gallery, and we had a couple of Aboriginal artists in there, brilliant. But they were very, very specific about who was able to look in their studio and who was able to work with them. And he was really nice to me. And for some reason, I was one of the only people that he invited into his studio to talk about his work with him. And I learned a lot from, the centres that are amazing that work with the artists. And I'm outside that, but I'm willing to learn. That's, I think, the biggest thing is I'm willing to listen and make space for everybody within my practice. I'm still learning. I mean, I learn every day.
And how do you go about learning?
I mean, go to talks, go to events. Especially after my trip this year. Have you read The Stranger Artist? Oh, I picked up some brilliant. There's just some brilliant books available for those that are open to listen and understand. And it's a bit like a religion. It crosses so many people's moral compasses, their beliefs, and living off the land. And I just think reading and being open to even the schools. I learned from my children coming home from school, because I also didn't grow up having any idea about a lot of Aboriginal culture or Australian culture. So it all informs everything. You just have to be open-minded, I think. And
with that, is there, I guess, something that you wouldn't paint?
That's a very good question. I think at the end of the day, if I'm true to how I respond and paint, it isn't anybody else's, it's mine. Oh no, as I say, I've only been outside that far up once, but I would love to go back, Nick. I'd love to go back and I'd probably be differently prepared mentally by going back to such a sacred place. But we were such an amazing bunch of women that I went with. There was nothing. Everybody was so mindful of everything they did like you are in life, I think.
I want to talk about collectors a bit. We were talking about this before we started. I guess, how do you approach collectors? As in, what's your, I guess, attitude towards them? I'm sure it's not bad, but... And how does that inform the future work you're making?
Yeah.
Something that I'm quite interested in.
Yeah. That is a good question, because I don't really approach collectors. It's been the other way around, that, as a progression we were discussing earlier about where you start off and how your work and your pricing and where you show, everything evolves. So if I have the faith and that they're the ones that like my work, I keep doing me and pushing myself to improve what I do and how I see it as an artwork. And if they see I'm sure that a lot of people are the same. If they see the progression and they enjoy your work, they are going to keep following. And it is an enormous compliment that I have return collectors, because not only does that collector want two of the same artist's work, but they can see a progression in my work. I mean, the other night I thanked one of my collectors very sincerely for purchasing a painting. Her response was, "You're not a charity, you don't have to thank me, we love your work." And I was like, okay, but I am still extremely grateful that people choose to spend their money and want to look at my work daily. So it's always something. I mean, how does one increase the collector base? I mean, I can look at my analytics on my website, and I can look at, I've got a big following in America. I don't know why. I don't know if there's in California that way. I don't know if there's they can really respond to the landscape I paint here. It's interesting. It is interesting. It's just I think I have a touch of faith in the universe that something will come up. It's gonna be something will come up. We're good. We'll just keep going and keep pushing and make opportunities for people. I do commissions occasionally, but it has to be a client or a collector that just happens to love my style of painting and is very open. It's usually, I suggest a place that is really important to them or something that has a special meaning. I can't be told that. I really struggle if they're like, I've got an amazing sofa that would match this palette. That's almost telling me what colours to use. I wouldn't necessarily take on a commission like that, because I think it doesn't work for either party. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
In terms of your style, also, like, I guess some artists stay consistent through their whole career,
yeah,
and others might kind of start exploring different styles. And I'd imagine that's something that could possibly maybe not alienate, but kind of leave your previous collectors less interested in buying your work.
Mm.
I mean, is that something you consider in terms of, like, do you think about maybe changing the way you do things, or making, I guess, different styles of painting, or using different colours? And when thinking about that, do you think, well, maybe the collectors that have bought my previous work won't be interested in it, and does that kind of maybe stop you from exploring these newer ideas?
Yeah, no, to be honest, that's not in my head when I'm making a painting. It's if I love the painting and I feel like I've pushed new ideas, like this newer body of work, I feel like someone pointed out to me quite literally, I really draw with paint, and I've always said that. I don't necessarily paint in the traditional sense. I feel like the mark making and the drawing. So there was elements in the newer works which were, I feel like I'd stopped. The marks were a little bit, much more considered, much more. I had to turn the painting around and leave it, because I think my end goal is to keep not reducing it, but not over painting it. So I can recognise my work from 20 years ago. It's still my work, but you'd like to think that, life experience and physical painting a lot, you are going to keep pushing your ideas and how much can this be pushed this way and pulling that way. And I did use oil sticks in some of the paintings as well, and some oil pastels, which if you spray with a fixative, dry like a normal paint. So that was not a massive difference to someone that's coming in to see the work, but that they were different approaches to the surface, which I'm thoroughly enjoying, and definitely a different palette where you are.
I've got one last question for you, Sophie. I know you've got a busy day. Well, you've been up north. Where are you going next, and why? Where do you want to explore?
Well, we go to Sydney a lot. We go to New South Wales a lot, which I think we're going up there to. Can't exactly remember in January. A couple of national parks, which I always enjoy. Big trips. We do a lot of mini breaks. We're going down to the Great Ocean Road. So I'm doing an ultrathon. Running an ultrathon in September. And then my next biggest thing that I've got locked in, I'm doing the Margaret Olley residency at the Tweed Regional Gallery next October, which I don't know what that will entail. I just have given myself permission and space to visit somewhere new with the space and the time to really think about my practice is more.
It's a beautiful gallery.
Yeah, I've never been. Is it? Yeah, I've been looking forward to that. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be a few. We went to Italy a few weeks ago, so there'll be a few more trips that I can try and squeeze in. And mini breaks seem to be the way forward. Tasmania was the last one.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, with actually 3 other women that I went to the Northern Territory with. We've started going for 4 days here and there to different remote places. So, yeah, we'll have to see.
So sticking with Australia mostly?
I think to begin with, yeah. I think it's manageable with a family. It's manageable for 4 days here and there without it being too much of a strain on everybody.
Well, sounds like a plan, and thank you for coming along.
Thank you for inviting me, David.